Okay, hello, Art History 2025-26. Today, I'm in Michigan, so let me move this over. Going to look at this and talk a little bit about the vocabulary that we've already gone over and think about what's coming up. So, this is a beaker. It's got a motif on it, this part right here, that looks like the body of an animal with a little beard, and then these really long horns that we suspect is a type of antelope, but it is in fact an ibex like type of antelope. So the name Beaker with ibex motif means that we are describing this animal that's here, but there are actually more animals hidden within this piece itself. This brings us to more description of the pieces. One way that we can talk about art is how the artist has made decisions to divide up a piece like this. This beaker has what we would say are three registers. At the bottom, we have the large register with the ibex motif and this small, maybe family insignia. It's important though because it's not just on one side of the beaker, it's on multiple sides. If we were to rotate this, we would see it repeated, and anything that's repeated is, of course, therefore important. Then we have a line. So above that first lowest register or part of the larger image, we have what looks like elongated dogs. Running, perhaps, or stretching, it almost looks like to me, like they're doing a pose or something like that. But we can see their head, their long kind of like face, and then these little ears and that sort of thing. And one is kind of chasing the other. You can see like a tail here very nicely. And then we have another line, so that divides this into another space for us to make marks and that sort of thing. So we have the ibex, the dogs, and then above that, if I was in class, I would ask, what do we think those are? Sometimes people think like music notes and that sort of thing, but the pretty much the recognized, accepted explanation is that these are birds with little bodies and really long necks going up all the way to these little heads up here and two legs going into what could be water. These three lines that are above this larger line might represent water, and that these would be wading in water. So with the size of these horns, the length of these necks, and the length of these bodies, we would say that this beaker is decorated in a way that leans towards abstraction. This isn't trying to be a realistic depiction of what an ibex looks like, or what a dog looks like, or what a bird standing in the water looks like. This is meant to be stylized. They're trying to deliberately stylize these animals. And those are the kind of words that we will start to use to describe art when we're writing about it for other people. Okay. More about the beaker with ibex. If I go and click on here and then go to our next slide and move myself out of the way, you can see what I just described right there. But something else that we might note about this is that it may have been made on the potter's wheel. How do we know that? Well, it's very thin and its shape is very symmetrical. Now, a potter's wheel would have been a big technological advance for these people in modern day Iran at the time. It was found near a place called Susa, which is in Iran. And if we go back to our fine spot discussion from the other day, usually either burial sites or trade routes, this would have been a burial site. So it was surrounded with other objects that were buried with humans and human remains. Um, Thus, we feel like this object would have been something that was valuable to the person. Um, Otherwise, why would you bury it with them when they passed away? Um, there's metallic objects, there's baskets that are mixed amongst these, although there were not human remains in this beaker, there were human remains as well. So it wasn't buried, you weren't buried in the beaker. It was part of a number of other things that accompanied you into your burial site. If we think about that, who else does that? Can anybody think of a group of people who buried important people with a lot of other objects? The answer would be the Egyptians, right? So is there a commonality between these two cultures in Iran and Egypt? Again, we want to be careful about assuming that one influences another. But this is a very, very early example, Neolithic times basically, of this happening before the era of great cities. We haven't progressed far enough into history to have stable farming situations and therefore places where people would be able to live for long durations of time. That's another unit, the beginning of new cities. So we are. It's interesting to find that this place, Susa, was an important place for people to bury their important people, and of course, they would outfit them with a lot of examples of wealth or things that they might need, say, in an afterlife, even before the Egyptians. Okay. All right, so if we move forward from that, we've talked a little bit and we've gone kind of slow about what we've learned. So there are things that we can take away. These are just some of them, but we can continue to take more away from each section and kind of think about these things, which will then grow into themes that connect pieces from prehistory all the way up to our contemporary artworks. But at least three things that we know based on what we've looked at thus far. Um, that some of the oldest objects that we're looking at came from Africa. Prehistoric art is often related to rituals or some kinds of spiritualities, and that art objects have an evolving interpretation based on interdisciplinary evidence. In class, we talked about interdisciplinary evidence. What does that mean? And that means that if we looked at that example of the running horned woman again and said, why are we interpreting it as being influenced by Egyptians, that we could go on and say, well, maybe that's a bias. If we look at science, geography, history, other things, we can start to change people's minds and therefore change the way people write about objects and art history. So art history changes as we continue to interpret it and discover more about it scientifically, or even just thinking about our own mindset as we start to look at these sorts of things. So the way we think about running hornwomen has changed, but that's not the only piece that the way we think about it has changed over time. So that is something to think about. In addition, we're going to think about the vocab as we continue and pick up the pace a little bit. We're going to be confronted with lots of new words. We've already looked at least 10 words. Menhirs, those giant stones, right? So take a moment today and think about, do I know what all of these words are? How would I define them? Megaliths, posts and lintel, people and laying down, post and lintel. Visual evidence, that's something we went over. Contextual evidence. Shamanism, what the heck is that? Register, we just talked about that today. Rendering and abstraction, things that are realistic are rendered. Things that are abstracted are stylized. We just went over that today. So I'll leave you today with this famous scene. Okay. So, that, my friends, was a shamanistic voyage. Simba's a shaman. So, we'll stop there for today, and I will stop this recording, and I will see you on Thursday.